Recording in progress. Hello, everybody. You can see who's in attendance. I'm going to change my view here to speaker view. And now I'm going to introduce David Clinnick. Before I do that, I want to thank ICO, who has our family engineer has created an outdoor air conditioning system. I can't tell you in full detail, it would take too long what she's constructed. That's genius. David and I met up in the open space trail as he caught me bushwhacking, well, doing something I'm not supposed to do. But it's on a trail. Brian knows, he's taken it with me. Named after my youngest grandchild. It's the Sawyer Cutoff, and we bonded on the trail instantly. We dived right into history. He'd lived in Singapore and had been a consultant at the museums there. And then I told him, wait, you know, our history group is doing Silk Roads. And he responded immediately. He said, well, you know, there's an interesting split between East and West. And it turned in a nutshell, I'm sure I'm over generalizing. What we learned is they didn't have as many stone tools because they had bamboo.
That's one of the arguments.
I told you I was going to do that. So Ramsey was going to be on vacation in June, and we needed, I thought, a guest speaker. And since he could talk about the early split of the Silk Road, we got him. And he came here, and that's where he met some of our neighbors. Brian is here today. And so Brian and I arranged to take a walk out in the open space. And as we're walking on the fire trail, well, we each walked maybe 100 times. David reaches down and says, well, here's a worked piece of obsidian. And we walked by it like 1,000,000 times. And I said, really? Really? So there we were, and we were hooked. And he taught us so much on the walk. We did a second walk, and we're up on the top of the ridge, and we're looking at the trail that leads to the Indian Valley School, where all our kids went. And he said, you know, that's part of the American Discovery Trail. What's that? And it's think Appalachian Trail, think Pacific Crest Trail. It is a combination of many different trails that have put together, going from east to west across the United States, from Delaware Bay to Point Reyes. And it runs right along what we call the Mount Diablo Briones Trail. But if you go out and step 1 foot off of the Indian Valley property onto the first trail, and you turn right, you can walk to Delaware Bay. It's 4,700 miles, but there are trails that you could follow. You have to go up to Mount Diablo and then down off the back. If you turn left, you go to Point Reyes. It's 121 miles, and you've got to take a ferry, but it's a little more complicated. And he said, yeah, Miwok trails are probably part of that. It's probably what you're looking at. The magic word, Miwok, because we're doing California history, and we're just beginning we just finished all the geography and climate and air and water. And now we're ready to stir in some humans from Siberia. And I think David's going to take that up as we speak. Now, so you can see his slides. Everything's going to go a little wonky for a few minutes. The next thing you'll see, will I hope,
Go to the home screen here.
will be his slides. So this is, take a look at David one last time. What could go wrong? Okay.
Okay. Are we ready now, everybody? All right, well, I want to say thank you to everyone being here. For those who did watch my presentation before, I think it was two slides. So, I apologize for that, but it's I always like to put us within kind of the chronological context, because we're going to talk about quite a bit of deep time, and it's difficult to comprehend. And a lot of people will ask me or other archaeologists, how do you comprehend the deep time of human history? And the reality is, you just don't think about it. You accept date. It's like it's any other calendar date. Your frame of reference is just that. There's no way to comprehend what counts. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask all of you on Zoom to mute, because if you make a noise, it switches the screen to you. Okay, so everybody go on mute. Thank you.
So that's going to disrupt the next thing to say, which was, if anyone has any questions, particularly since we are a small group, I'd be happy to answer them. So we're a small group. I think we're only going to cover about an hour max today. Maybe we'll pick up later. It's my understanding. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff. And like I said, if there are questions, with your smart questions, because I might not have all of the answers. So what the title of the slide is, the people of the Americas of craft sports, and it is the complete one. We're going to cover a pretty broad range, like chronological range, geographic range, very quickly. Even if this goes on for 2 hours, if we do another hour-long session, it's still going to be very, very important little snippets of information. I'm going to try to say, I'm going to try to give you what is the kind of normative, typically held view of the current state of the literature now. That doesn't mean that that's what I agree with or everyone in the field agrees with. I'll try to give you some generalized models of how to assume humans, again, Homo sapiens, made it to what we call the world. I don't think we made it to accomplish everything that John had asked for when we were on our hike. I think part of the idea was getting us from out of Africa and then all the way up to maybe the little ice age, and what we would classify as medieval Europe. It's not medieval North America, right? Here, I'm not going to get us to there. I think for sure I'm not going to get us there
today, but there will be other sessions
today. But I think in these two graph series of talks, to the North Diameter range around 10,000 years ago, and I know that's that's 9,500 years after what people.
So if you have a cell phone that ends in 5997, yeah, you're not on mute.
So we will, but again, we're going to be covering, which I'll see in a second, such an incredibly wide period of time. So you go like the last 130,000 years to about 10,000 years before present. And so we have our outline. John's already given a great personal introduction. I'll just add a few more little things. So John had said this before. I do some lecturing at St. Mary's. I do some consulting with a bunch of. When I was at, I did a fellowship in Harvard, I had an opportunity to have access to their wonderful libraries and to other researchers and scholars, started looking at certain aspects of the people of the Americas. We'll talk a little bit more about that kind of research critique that I would publish that work. So while I'm by no means a leading expert in the people of the Americas, I have at least published on it in peer-reviewed, journals. So someone's let me say something once. Maybe they don't like that. We are going to talk about chronology. So these will be some slides we saw before, but it's always important to say to figure out where we are in time and space. We're going to talk about the paleoclimate. John's, I guess, mentioned some of this before, but I just want to reiterate what we mean by glacial and glacial cycles and what the whole process means over this kind of deep timeline. We're going to look at the, Homo sapiens sapiens world colonization. So, humans evolved as a separate kind of subdivided population, divided away from other archaic hominins, potentially, and then migrating out of Africa, colonizing the old world. And then we'll get into the actual peopling of the Americas. So different models and hypotheses about entry times and points. And we're going to get into a little bit, a really brief look actually at the lithic industries, because so much of this in every case relies on lithic industries, right? So if we're dealing with lithic industries need stone tools, right? So we say things like lithics. A lithicist is someone who specializes in analyzing stone tools, figuring out how they worked, where they came from, kind of really using various different behavioral and economic principles and figures to assess this stuff. So again, if I use unnecessary jargon, I apologize. Raise your hand and say, well, what do you mean? Because no one else talks this way. But lithics, again, stone tools, different types of stone tools play so heavily, as you know, this is the Stone Age. And what that means is the majority of our human residues, which compose the archaeological record, are going to be stones and stone. Right, so some more interesting things start to happen. Interesting for most folks, at least, towards the end of the Upper Paleolithic in regards to greater expressions of symbolic material culture, but nevertheless, the bulk of our data is going to be stones. And when I was a graduate student, we had at the university a large component of historical archaeologists and then a component of prehistoric archaeologists. The historic archaeologists, particularly the Romanists, medievalists, would always make fun of us and just say, you guys spent all your time with magic monkey stones. That was as far as they didn't have much work, and we made a big fuss about what their work was. But I think there was something. We'll see if you guys feel the same way. So if we look at time, for those who are here before, you've seen this slide. I call this human time. So when I mean human time, I mean the Homo genus in this regard. Okay, so it's not our species specific, but from the time of the emergence of the earliest members of our genus, so Homo habilis, Homo erectus, various different kind of forms of things that we call erectines. So not australopithecines, all the way up to right here and now. And human time, as far as us as a genus, seems to be pretty well to correspond pretty well with the Pleistocene and the Holocene, which we're in now. So beginning of the Pleistocene pretty much seems to also be, for the most part, the beginning of the fossil record associated with our genus. And then along with that, we still get this archaeological component in the form primarily, again, of stone tools, and occasionally, if lucky, butcher faunal remains, and then increasingly other tend to go along that other waste residues and signs of plant processing use and so forth. The Pleistocene really starts, basically 2.6 million years ago. But for lack of making this little pie chart very simple, I could put it with 2 million years. So again, some of you guys have already seen this. For the most part, the way in which we divide up this time is you can look at this at the face of a clock. That we, over 3/4 of this pie chart is the lower Paleolithic. Okay, so that's everything from the emergence of the Homo genus, and then up to the diversification at the end of this period in what we call the middle Pleistocene. Even though we've taken up the majority of the Pleistocene at this point, you can see clearly from the pie chart. The next phase is called middle Pleistocene, is when you start to get this emergence of large brain hominins. And what we mean by large brain hominins aren't large brain relative to chimpanzees. By the beginning of the Pleistocene, those hominins already are pretty large brain relative to our close closest living relatives, so chimpanzees and gorillas, we mean large brain relative to us. Okay, and in some cases, cranial capacity could be even larger. That's an effect of allometric scan. So that's just an effect of how kind of massive these different, sometimes refer to them mostly as archaic humans, right? So then when we get into this next wedge, we're into the middle Pleistocene, and we refer to this period as the middle Stone Age in Africa and the middle Paleolithic in Europe. And it's within this period that really interesting things happen. Actually, we're going to focus on the beginning of our story here today. This is when the Neanderthals firmly kind of emerge, if you will, as its own unique population, a unique set of morphological traits. But so do anatomically modern humans are species. There are different ways of manufacturing stone tools that seem to involve a kind of greater degree of cognitive capacity. And then it's into that next green sliver that we have Upper Paleolithic, and I've actually included parts of Mesolithic there. So the very end of the Pleistocene, that also includes the last glacial maximum, and we'll talk about what these glacial cycles are. And that's also the time period where we would conservatively say that the people of the Americas occurred. So once Homo sapiens have finally made their way all the way throughout East Asia into far Siberia, and then into Thuringia, and eventually the Americas. And of course, the next little bit there is farming, and the next bit, which you guys heard before, is from the very earliest usage of metals, so even in the Chalcolithic, all the way to right now. So everything most people see is as ancient time, which maybe you guys can't even see on the screen here. It's this last little yellow sliver right there, right? So that's everything that yes, sir.
Just a comment about metals, right?
Yeah.
The linking that to the obsidian worked piece that you showed Brian and I,
Yeah.
out on the trail that we walked hundreds of times. The one explanation of why the New World civilizations didn't develop metal is they didn't need to. They had obsidian, and it's kind of the same argument of how come the East, a part of the human ecumen, didn't evolve stone tools. They had bamboo.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I can answer that real briefly, I think the problem with that is that the centers where one, there was metal use in the Americas, and there was metal use in North America, right? There was some use of copper ore and so forth. But I think the other problem is that that in the old world, some of the early centers of metal use actually had obsidian, right? So if we look at the Near East, there's a very good extensive trade starting in the Paleolithic, but very robust in the Neolithic, and then going into the Chalcolithic of obsidian exchange. Same thing into Greece and so forth. So there is obsidian. There's a lot of obsidian in the old world. But there is an interesting occurrence, which is stone tools become kind of, you can argue, I don't like this because it's so qualitative, but more finely constructed in the Chalcolithic and in the early Bronze Age, because bronze is very expensive. And there's all these debates about does that involve elites using stuff and so forth. But what it does do is it gives you a nice malleable, it's malleable, but it's also then therefore resilient tool to pressure plate stone work. So you can really finely work stone. So what you normally would use, we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation, it's like an antler tile. It's a pressure plate flint or obsidian, and that wears down with the antler tile. The antler kind of breaks, fractures. And what you do is, what people did was put a little bit of bronze or a little bit of copper into the end at that time, and then you could really work very well. So the key indicator of the Stone Age in particularly like Northwestern Europe is actually still stone tools. And it's a particular kind of probably arrowhead, potentially dark points that are made. These little bipoles that are that's an indicator of the bronze. Okay, so where are we on this planet within this time frame? So again, this is the last slides that those who listen to me before have to suffer through again. So we have our geologic chart here, and that again includes everything from basically the extinction event that led to the dinosaurs all the way up to present, and it's in here just to make us look small. No, we can still small, but it is important to look at the very right hand column because what you are seeing with that, you can actually look at the sea level column too. So those squiggly lines. And that is telling us, and this is important information, so where they kind of on a very rough grain level reconstruct massive paleoclimatic shifts, and then therefore hydrological shifts and even coastal geographic shifts over time. So this look between on the very right column, it might seem not very relevant, but it's actually measuring in marine sediment cores the ratios of oxygen isotopes, in this case, oxygen 18, which I would need my slides that I give to my undergrad students to explain exactly how that process works. But all you need to know is that depending on the ratio of oxygen isotopes, it tells us quite a bit in relationship to the glacial melt, particularly how active the north and south poles are, particularly the north pole. And that gives us an indication of global sea surface temperature, kind of writ large. So what you see increasingly is a downturn in temperature. So even though we're in a Holocene now, and we don't see ourselves as being in an ice age, which we are not, we're in an interglacial, we're still in a significantly cooler period on the history of this planet in general, particularly in relationship to the Miocene and even the Pliocene. And if you look carefully, what you'll see is an increased kind of rapidity in these ups and downs, right? So peaks of the oxygen 18, which are showing significant temperature shifts over kind of tens of thousands of year periods, and then significant shifts in sea levels. So the actual kind of, you're talking about changes and shifts in coastal margins, right? And once we get into the Pleistocene, we can think of the global geography as far as looking at tectonic movement as being as it is now with there are certain areas where we have more or less uplift. We've had more uplift in California. We've had more uplift in the Rift Valley, which is why we get this exposure in fossils. We have some uplift in other areas, but really relative to these massive continental changes, we're not that much, right? So when we talk about changes at sea surface level, we're still talking about where the continents are now. Really, for the most part, that shift has to do with how extensive the ice sheets and glaciation. In some cases, there's some uplift that affects coastal margins, but for the most part, this is an effect of the polar caps and just continental glaciers as it is. And that's why we have the picture on the left. So what do we mean by entering into the quote unquote ice age? Well, by the Pliocene, you get a pretty good, southern ice, the southern pole becomes glaciated pretty much all year round. And then you start to get into the Pleistocene, you end up with the formation of this ice sheet in the northern hemisphere. It's pretty robust even now during the winter months. And when you're in a glacial cycle, it really comes down to how extensive is that ice sheet throughout the year, and then how extensively far down to the North Atlantic does that ice sheet, expand, particularly during winter months, and then that has an effect on continental glacier coverage. And so then, how do we get this data? Just to throw this out there, of course, it's all going to be proxies, right? We don't have a window into this. We don't have individual temperature measurements. But again, we're going to be looking at isotope ratios, and we're going to be looking at analogical analysis of phytoliths and pollen in sediment cores or profiles. So on the left-hand side here, you have a sediment profile. This is not a core, but this is from the site that I excavated. The last site I would love to go back out there, but I think that it's very disruptive with. And my very crude stratigraphic chart on the right, breaking this down, and you take a profile of sediment, and then have that set off for various different kinds of analysis. Some of them being looking at columns and phytoliths that tell us quite a bit about what the flora was and how that shifted over time. And that gives us really a good grasp on what the ecology was, and a pretty good grasp too on what temperature was. Okay. And then just in Singapore. So for example, there's something that I think never gets enough coverage, which is in Clear Lake, just north of us. In the 70s and into the 80s, there was a brilliant series of cores or research done on cores out of that lake that go back at least 75,000 years. I think in some cases back 130,000 years. One of the main things that they are looking at is ratios of oak pollen. And that's a strong indicator. So oak pollen is grassland. And most of these times that's what we're looking at. So that's an indicator of temperate conditions, mosaic woodland versus grassland, and kind of more tundric Arctic conditions. You can see that over